Alright, today we're going to use I'm going to teach you to use a tool called Zotero. Many of you may have already used Zotero. It's a very useful resource for historians, and one of the reasons it's such a useful resource is it was a resource created in a partnership with historians and kind of computer scientists and programmers and so forth. If any of you have ever had a library skills class, introduction to the library and so forth, they often show Zotero and EndNote in there, and I like Zotero better than EndNote, but they're both exceptional digital tools. The great thing about Zotero is the main point of Zotero is it helps you keep track of the research that you do on the web. It's an easy way to kind of compile notes, compile sources, compile URLs for websites so that you can go back later on and incorporate those into your bibliographies in any paper that you do or any kind of presentation or whatever it is. Now, Zotero was developed by George Mason University. They have a center at their Center for History and New Media at George Mason. If you can see here, if we'll pull up, they have the Roy Rosenweig. Roy Rosenweig was a leader in digital history, one of the real first historians who started to put together the fact that the world is changing and that historians need to be embracive of these new digital tools. But Center for History and New Media has done a lot of different projects. They do a lot of online exhibits. They do a lot of online course building, online US course you see in here. They also um, created Zotero. They do a lot of digital tools. You see here research and tools link. And those tools are extremely valuable. Zotero is one of the most valuable ones, but they have others, including Omeka. Omeka is perfect for museum. I mean, if you plan to go into the museum world and you're more than likely going to end up at a place that doesn't have a whole lot of resources. Most museums lack a budget. If you want to do some really cool online exhibits, online archival collections, one of the best ways to do that is through Omeka. Omeka is just a wonderful, wonderful tool for that, and we'll play with Omeka later this semester as well. So just great, source. So they also created at the Center for History and New Media this digital history, a guide to gathering, preserving, and presenting the past on the web. It's kind of like the first textbook about digital history. That was written by Roy Rosenweig. And Roy Rosenweig passed away a few years ago, so now staff there continually update it here and there. But there's a bunch of others. I mean, they have blogs and podcasts about how to use these digital sources. Those are great ones to incorporate into your classes, things that you can use. But we're going to use Zotero today. Zotero basically is a plugin for Mozilla Firefox. I mean, that's the way that it works best. So in order to use that, let's go ahead and do Mozilla Firefox. If you don't have Mozilla Firefox is basically a web browser. There are lots of web browsers. Used to, Internet Explorer pretty much was the dominant web browser out there, and it's the one that comes standard on most PCs, largely because of Microsoft. But there are others: Firefox Mozilla or Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome. On the Mac, there's Safari. There's lots of different browsers now, but best you may go ahead. So go ahead and download Firefox if you don't already have it on your computer. If you have it on your computer, you can kind of just skip this step. So go ahead and pause this recording while you're going ahead and downloading Firefox. Once you've downloaded Firefox, you're then going to have to go download Zotero. Uh, Zotero has a nice home page here. I want to point out a couple things about this website as we get started. Up here, if you look at the URL, Zotero is a .org site. When you're trying to evaluate the quality of some of the websites that you encounter on the web, the .org is usually a pretty good sign that it's a good website. Usually those are reserved for government entities, nonprofit agencies, grant funding institutions. It's usually a much more, usually a better quality site. Usually now there's a bunch of junk out there as well at .org, but at least that's a good sign. Another way to tell if what you're using on the digital web is actually something that's been reviewed and looked at by other scholars or things like that, is to look down and try to figure out where they received their funding from. And most sites have to, if they've received any kind of major funding, they have to include a statement of their funders and links to their funders on their main page. I mean, that's pretty much required by most grants. So down here in the bottom left, you can see Zotero is a project of the Center for History and New Media, and is funded by the Andrew Mellon Foundation, major foundation, million dollar grants all the time to folks. Andrew Mellon, big steel money up in Pittsburgh, basically. They only fund the best in arts and humanities projects. And actually, it's very difficult for humanities sometimes to get a grant from the Mellon Foundation. So obviously, Zotero was able to prove that it had kind of a universal application for this. Also, they got a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Again, who better to evaluate the quality of a digital tool that's meant to help students do research than an institute that focuses on library services. And then finally, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. And it is incredibly difficult to get a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. Sloan funds a lot of public broadcasting, a lot of educational tools, and their grants are extremely competitive. I mean, you have to go through a strenuous application process just to be able to apply for the Sloan Foundation grant. So by the time you look at that, you can tell they obviously received some serious funding. The Center for History and New Media has also received several major, huge NEH, National Endowment for the Humanities grants as well. They're by and large considered cutting edge in the field of digital history, and the leaders. If you were to ask who is the leader in the field of digital history, it would be the folks at George Mason. I want to point out some things about Zotero that makes it a particularly effective tool. Number one, if you look here on the menu screen, you see this get involved. Get involved in Zotero. Go ahead and click on that. Zotero certainly was developed by a core group of about 12 historians and computer scientists, programmers. But in order to really create Zotero, Zotero really was more of an open source creation. And what that means is, when the internet was created, it was really meant to be a tool to share information across boundaries, across large groups of individuals, and to be a tool where different individuals could, over time, perfect and improve whatever product was out there. Basically, programmer A would build the base program, programmer B would then come along and add some modifications to it, and then maybe at a later date, programmer C would come along and update the entire program to improve it, constantly building upon it. And that's how Zotero was built. And Zotero, like I said, there's a large community of people on the internet who this is what they do. This is fun for them. So this is definitely how. And you can see here they say, if you have some programming experience, particularly with JavaScript or XML, there are lots of ways to contribute to Zotero. And JavaScript is a language that we're not going to learn in this class, but I do recommend, if you really love doing digital work and you want to position yourself as a digital historian that could really work for some great institutions, the big Smithsonian kind of places. If you can learn JavaScript, take a class basically on computer programming that teaches JavaScript and XML languages, that really makes you extremely competitive because only the tiniest percentage of historians have any real experience with JavaScript. Like I said, even myself, I've barely ever used JavaScript. It's really, to me, a very difficult language and something I definitely need more training on to learn. Another great thing about Zotero, if you see over here, is they have forums. If you ever have questions about Zotero or need help about it, there are bugs in Zotero all the time. Bugs are little glitches, things that interfere with its operations. Those bugs are there just like with any website. And so there are people out there who are constantly updating, constantly improving Zotero. And sometimes, you're having a problem that other people are also having, so they share it, and then programmers can go in and kind of fix the problem as they're able to look at it. So anyway, go ahead and go to the home page on Zotero and go ahead and download Zotero. Once you download it, you'll start up your Mozilla Firefox browser, and Zotero, if you look here on my screen at the bottom of it, there's a toolbar across the bottom, stretched across the bottom, that is the Zotero toolbar. Once you've downloaded Zotero successfully, it should appear down there. So that's where we'll start from there.